What's up, Zach here, and yeah, today I got the Way of Wade 8083 Ultra V2. That is a mouthful. We'll see how many times I say that correctly in the video. But it is a pretty substantial update, in my opinion, upgrade from the 8083 Ultra. So let's get right into it. And thanks to Wade for sending me a pair of these over to check out. However, this video is by no means sponsored, and as always, all opinions, good, bad, and indifferent, are still my own. Now, getting into the uppers of the 8083 Ultra V2, it's the biggest material change from the 8083 Ultra, and some oddities to it, which is pretty crazy. I mean, it's not what I expected. So in the uppers, you do get this really just tight meshing all the way around it. It's double reinforced. And then on the tongue of these, it's just an elastic tongue, but because the sides of it are so reinforced and because the lace line has such a strong stitching into that tongue, you still get a really strong tie down on these. You got these two pivot points with the ropes here in the forefoot. That's probably where it would fail first. But then it goes all the way up here into the ankle collar, into this, a little bit more of a high top. That's really another big material change on the Ultra V2 versus the Ultras. And the thing is a lot of times these laces, when you have a really thin tongue, will start to dig in. However, the redistribution of the tension on these ones is good enough to where I never felt any discomfort from that. I did have some other issues, which we'll talk about in the fit section on other parts of it, but in terms of the lace line, really no problems whatsoever, which was a pretty big surprise to me. Now, this does go up, like I said, into a higher top. It is, flexible for sure, but it does give some nice biofeedback on the distal leg. And then you do have, which is different from the 8083 Ultra to the V2, is you have a really padded ring around the ankle collar. I had absolutely zero heel slippage on these. That does come with some break-in to it, which like I said, we'll talk about in the fit, but in terms of the performance of that, it was really outstanding. Now, if you look at this on the breathability test, which obviously you can see I just did the breathability mapping, they only heated up 102.4 degrees, and I thought these would heat up a lot more than the 8083 Ultra. They ended up heating up less. I think a lot of it can be shown on the breathability mapping of them. Number one, fog was just blowing out of those little hexagonal holes in the forefoot. It was actually pretty funny to watch. And then it was also blowing out of pretty much all of the forefoot. It took a second, but then once it started, it really started blowing out of all of that meshing. I noticed on the heat gun too, I was actually feeling heat coming here out of the side in this little TPU window as well. That's the same thing on the 8083 Ultra as well, but I think it's more, even though this is a little bit of a heavier upper on these, the engineering of it I think is just a little bit better than the 8083 Ultra, so that you're getting a little bit better lockdown and containment versus the 8083 Ultra, but also just as good, if not better, breathability. Now the upper durability test, 10-second tie grit sandpaper. I mean, the burr does start to get through that top layer, but that layer is so thick. So, I mean, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. Plus, the outsole tread rides up pretty high there. So, I'd say if you're a dragger or slider on an outdoor court, this might start to look a little bit worn, but the integrity should still be there. So looking at the midsole, the 8083 Ultra V2, yeah, I said it right again. It's the same as the 8083 Ultra. It's an entire bed of thermoplastic foam, that boom foam. Then you have a 4-foot loaded shank, which is plastic, and pretty stiff at that. It does ride up into the arch, a little more arch support. The weird thing is the shank scores on these, it does get just a 0.2 because you do have a bottom loaded, very thin carbon fiber shank. Then you also get the 4-foot shank, which does right up here into the midfoot, but plantarly only goes into the forefoot, so that is a 0.2. The thing I've noticed about the 8083 Ultra V2 and just Ultra, they are definitely more of a bouncy drop-in midsole setup than a lot of other, drop-in shoes. Yes, a lot of drop-ins feel cushioned and they feel rubbery and cushy, but when you actually go to bend the shoe, they don't feel super violent when you're getting up off the ground, right? Like something that's more of a traditional stiff setup midsole that gives you a lot of diving board effect to it. The 8083 Ultra and Ultra V2 really have a nice combination of a very springy, spongy feeling underfoot, which is comfortable, on the footbed, but also that feeling of bounce and that feeling of launch. Same thing on the bounce height test, same thing on the 8083 Ultra, 40.5 centimeters in the rear foot, 40 in the forefoot. Number one, it shows you how well encapsulated boom foam is. It doesn't really matter what the environment is around it. Pretty much, functions pretty similar if it's a low stack or a high stack. But it just shows you, number two, that this foam does give a lot back, and with a shank that is a little bit stiffer there that does ride up into the arch, especially when you're pushing off medially. Remember, when you go for push off, right, your metatarsal heads will stack right? That's why basketball shoes are shaped the way they are. They're meant to be able to give you easier propulsion. And when you're in your last phase of stance, you're pushing off medially, right? So, I mean, really, it's only the inside of this one. So when you've got a lot more arch coverage here medial and it goes up higher, that gives the inside of your foot a little bit more mechanical advantage. That's why I like shoes that have a little bit of a longer shank. I think that gives you a more mechanical advantage there. But number two, this one actually combines some arch support to make that last phase of stance, which is push off, just a little bit more efficient. Getting into the outsole tread of the 808-3 Ultra V2, it's that rippling wave pattern that gets very dense right under the ball of the foot, as well as here in the back of the heel. Gets actually really wide in the midfoot, and then it also has this micro gridding on each tread line, which gives it a little bit of like a checkerboard effect there. That does give it a little more micro traction. Remember, you got your macro traction, which is the actual individual treads, and you've got this gridding, which some shoe companies are starting to do, and that gives you a little bit more fine touch grip. Now that's going to wear down, obviously, especially if you're wearing these on outdoor courts. Now that does give some outsized traction to the shoe, given its durability profile, which we'll see in a second. But on the grip test ramp, 43 centimeters, which is getting up into that higher range of gripping shoes. The thing is, if you take these outdoors, that gridding is going to start to wash away. If you look at the outsole durability test on these things, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, I mean, not even millimeter damage. I mean, these are good in terms of durability, except that if you want that real fine touch traction that gridding gives you, that micro gridding, keep them on indoor courts. Obviously keep them on softer courts because that's what it interacts with. Those little micro grids are meant to interact with hardwood, rubberized courts, whereas the macro traction, or the traction you just see, that's what's meant to be worn on outdoor courts. If you're just gonna use them for outdoor courts, they'll be fine. They'll last, a good amount of time, especially for a drop-in shoe. But if you want the really intimate tooling of this shoe, keep them on indoor. But if you are looking for one of the most durable drop-in midsole shoes for outdoor courts, these will still have you covered. The one thing about the V2 versus the 808-3 Ultra, the original, is its speed ratio. These come in at a 2.56, and the reason the speed ratio is down a little bit from the original is because they're a little bit heavier of a shoe. Now, the one thing I do like about these a little bit more is because they're a little bit higher topped, right? Yeah, you do have a little bit more intimate contact with the distal tibia, and so it does feel like the shoe is a little bit more of an extension of your leg. Is that speed something you're gonna really notice? To me, probably not. I don't think it's that much of a difference that you'll notice it, but if you are someone that really does notice weight in shoes, the 808-3 Ultra, it does feel lighter. So you're either gonna get that extension of your leg feeling with the 3 Ultra V2, or you can get the lighter package with the 808-3 Ultra. And that high top interaction with your leg brings me right into the fit of the V2s. They do fit a little bit different than the original, mainly in terms of break-in. The 808-3 Ultra, I mean, really, the break-ins, it's a little bit, but not much. The 808-3 Ultra V2 definitely takes a little bit more time to break in the ankle collar, because remember, from the upper section, it's got that really nice ring around your ankle. It just gives a ton of lockdown. These things, like I said, just suck your foot in so well, but it does take a while to break in. And that did get a lot better once I broke them in, and it did start to feel like, the Kobe's, once they start to break in, super buttery, just really nice around your legs. So the other thing you gotta remember with the fit of any drop-in shoe is usable space versus the actual length and width of the shoe. Now these come in at an 8.5 width for my size 11, which isn't as wide as some other shoes out there and isn't as wide as a lot of other Way of Wade shoes. And that's because, remember, the rails of the drop-in, they have to cradle your foot into the shoe. Something has to hold you in. Now, also with the length, your usable length is just a little bit less than other shoes. Now, if you're someone that likes to fit really one-to-one and have a lot of intimate contact, that's fantastic, right? The side of your foot will start to break down the sides of this drop-in, but then remember, you've got the side of the shoe, and then you've got this plastic piece here on the outside, this lateral TPU bar right there. So anybody with a tailor's bunion or a prominent styloid, more than likely is gonna be a little bit of a mismatch. Really, on most drop-in shoes, you're gonna be somewhat of a mismatch if there's anything that's stabilizing them. So, a narrow medium foot, I think can still go true to size. A 2E, honestly, I think you can go up 1/2 size, it'd probably be okay, still get this thing pretty one-to-one, like I said, because of the length issue. In terms of the snake bitten foot on these things, like I said, for a drop-in, I think I've said this on a lot of Way of Wade drop-ins, these are the best drop-ins for pretty much any plantar foot issue, Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis, bursitis, ball of foot pain, even arch pain. I mean, this thing's got reinforcement on its arch built in. So remember, you can't put an orthotic in a drop-in midsole shoe, but this is about as close as you are going to get to an over-the-counter orthotic in your shoe. So I think if you're looking at a drop-in midsole for something that's nagging you on the bottom of your foot, then these are going to be one of the best out there, if not one of the best in the last, few years. So as long as you get through the initial break-in phase, these things should treat you pretty well. And in terms of the all-important playability, I mean, I know this might be minutia, but I did like the V2 of this versus the V1. I actually thought the 808-3 was a better playing shoe than the 808-3 Ultra. And then I think the 808-3 Ultra V2 is kind of like number 2, right? I still think the 808-3 is the best in the lineup. I think this one though is a solid second place, just because once you do get through the break-in phase on this, it just feels like a little bit more of a complete package. All the trappings, the carbon fiber in the heel, and then, the shank on the drop-in, everything else, the uppers, just feels like much more of a maximalist drop-in shoe. The 808-3 Ultra is also a maximalist drop-in shoe, but I just feel like this one does it better, right? You get better contact with your leg, so the shoe feels a little bit more, like I said, like an extension of your leg, but it also not just for the fit and the weight redistribution of it, but more of when you're running up and down the court and you're trying to make hard cuts, you just get a little bit more biofeedback. It's not because it's a high tops don't stop ankle sprains, but you do get more biofeedback from these, so you just do feel a little bit more tactile in them. For some reason, I thought the grip was better on these. I know it's the exact same rubber, but I remember this one just not having the crazy grip of the 808-3s when they came out. This one feels much more like the 808-3s. I'm not sure, this just might have been just because of the dye on it. I have no idea, but I felt the grip on these was just rock solid as well. So like I said, if you want a maximalist drop-in midsole, something that does have a lot of nimble footwork, but also something that can hold your foot upright, that it's not gonna just bottom through it, or not gonna feel too flimsy like some drop-ins can, then yeah, this is, I think, is definitely a great pickup. If anybody has any tips on how to hit that shot the correct way, please let me know. So love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, especially because now we've got 3 options this year in terms of drop-ins from Way of Wade. If you are going Way of Wade, let me know in the comments down below which ones you're getting, or if you're going with something else completely, because there have been a lot more drop-ins coming out recently. Let me know which one you'd like to pick up in the comments below. And if you do want to see what I'm talking about with the siblings to the 808-3 Ultra V2, said it again right, and the 808-3 Ultra as well as the 808-3 Go Under the Knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.